correct, Sharon? Student Affairs Committee today. We will begin with item 8. Update. Chancellor?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the Board Committee. This report provides the fall to spring milestones toward student completion of credentials of value and transfer. And with your permission, Madam Chair, I will invite Dr. Perez, Dr. Burge, and Dr. Adil to the podium, and they will give an overview, provide a synopsis of the report, and respond to all questions. Dr. Burge will begin.
Thank you, Chancellor, trustees. So retention from term to term is one of the earliest indicators that students are on the path to reach their goals. Therefore, HCC tracks this and considers it an important leading indicator of student success. Now, when we talk about the retention rate, we're talking about the rate at which students remain enrolled at the same institution. The persistence rate is a rate that students remain enrolled at the same institution, and we also consider transfer and completion as positive outcomes towards persistence. Now, when we talk about fall to spring retention, we actually usually use retention because there doesn't tend to be a lot of transfer within that first term. We are seeing more short-term certificates, and so as the frequency of those increases, we'll be looking at persistence for fall to spring as well. So we track the Achieving the Dream cohort, which includes both full and part-time students. This is about 12,000 entering students every year, and it's much bigger than what's tracked by the coordinating board and IPEDS, which range from about 2,000 to 5,000 students. But given that the majority of our students are part-time, it's important that we track these students. So our retention was largely flat from fall to spring, but we do see over the past 2 years that we've started to increase that retention rate. We believe that that will carry over to our fall to fall retention because these two indicators tend to show the same typical patterns. Now, when we look at who is retained at HCC, we see that is related to course success. Students who succeed in at least one course are much more likely to be retained and persist than students who do not. Similarly, students who withdraw are more likely to leave us. And financial aid is always, of course, helpful to students in retention and persistence. Comparing this to benchmark data, you can see that there's been a lot of variability. That's primarily because of the pandemic, natural disasters, and those kinds of things. HCC is roughly in the middle in the fall to spring retention. When we look at success in gateway courses, this is one of the major strategies, of course, that we use to address student success and retention. And you can see across many of those large gateway courses, we've seen an increase, a substantial increase in success in the last year. So when we address retention and persistence, of course, that's our Texas Strong Pathways work, which is happening right now over at the Hyatt Regency. Our Caring Campus faculty and staff, which looks at what's happening in the classroom and what happens as students enter our campuses. And we continue to follow up consistently with stop-out students. We, of course, want our students to stay enrolled. So we focus on financial aid, partnering with the foundation. We work on preventing stop out because it's much easier to keep students enrolled than to try to bring them back. One of those ways is with increased advising. So thinking about the touch points at 15 hours, at 16 to 44 hours, at 45 hours, and when students are stopped out, and paying particular attention to each of these milestones and what students need at these milestones. Throughout the semesters, we try to contact our students regularly to help them understand what their next steps are and provide them with the resources that they need. In fact, we see the impact of these efforts in our advising numbers. At every single one of the touch points over the last year, we saw increased numbers of students coming into advising, and generally numbers that exceed the enrollment growth. So for most of these touch points, we're not only seeing more students, but a greater percentage of the students at these touch points. And so with that, I will open the floor for discussion. Oh, oops, sorry. Overall, we can see that our fall to spring retention is improving, and we're moving toward that best in class. Best in class over time has typically been between about 78 and 80%, and we're moving up from 74 to 77. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. The success in gateway courses is increasing as well, and so we expect that to have further gains for our retention. Given that return from stop-out campaigns meet with limited success, we lose track of our students, they're working, they're doing other things, we really primarily focus on trying to keep students enrolled toward their goals with stop-out, which doesn't mean reaching students and bringing them back from stop-out isn't important, but it's not enough. We have to address the root cause of the problem instead of relying on texts and phone calls after they're gone. That says, many of our students do stop out for financial reasons, so to the extent that we can help them financially stay enrolled, that's likely to increase our retention. And with that, I'm sorry, we're going back to discussion.
Trustee Sheben? Was that clear? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Great information.
Okay. Okay.
The next item is item item B, which is the KPI update for April of 2025. Chancellor?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the board. Now, this report provides an update on key performance indicators that are used to ensure accountability and drive continuous improvement. So with your permission, Madam Chair, I would like for Dr. Burrage, Dr. Perez to provide an overview and respond to questions. Dr. Burrage and Dr. Perez.
Okay. So today, in this presentation, I will provide an update on the KPIs of the strategic plan, provide some longitudinal and benchmark data, and discuss current strategies. So the KPIs for the strategic plan were adopted in 2020. So we provided the last 4 years of measurement. You can see that these KPIs were largely flat, but have begun to increase in the last 2 years. One thing I'd like you to note, however, is that 2 lag measures are the academic and workforce placement. These are the rates at which students are employed after completing awards at HCC. The latest data for those measurements is from students who completed in the summer of 2022. So that means that this data is actually quite old and really belongs more towards the middle of the chart. We are providing benchmark information, but one thing to note is just like in the retention presentation a few minutes ago, I pointed out that we're tracking a larger cohort than we can get in the benchmark data. Much of the same factors impact our ability to benchmark exactly the same measures for the KPI data. That said, the measures we do track that actually include a wider range of students roughly increase and decrease with the benchmark data I'm going to show you. So this is coordinating board's full-time, first-time in college cohort 3-year completion rate. The reason that I'm showing you coordinating board data is that it is the most recent data available. And I've shown you the change for our large city urban peers from 2019 to 2023. This is the 4-year completion rates. 4-year completion rates are actually shown as same and other colleges. So students who transfer and complete are in this chart as well. 6-year transfer rates are the shortest time frame that is available. 4-year transfer rates are only available for students who began around 2017, so we aren't able to provide those for you. However, you said HCC has been consistently towards the upper end of the transfer rates, although other colleges are catching up to us. So this is fall to fall retention, and you can see again that most of the colleges are increasing. This is academic job placement, and this one is interesting because academic job placement decreased substantially during the pandemic, and you can see that this effect was particularly large at Lone Star in Houston and San Jac, which leads us to think that there might be something going on in the Gulf Coast that resulted in this pattern for our region. And we see a similar pattern for the technical job placement as well, with more of the gig economy, more entrepreneurship, and some changes that happened over the pandemic. There was really a decrease across the board in job placement rates. Now, generally what we've seen is that persistence, completion, and transfer has all shown improvement, although that improvement has largely been in the last 2 years. Job placement dropped sharply during the pandemic and has not fully recovered. What HCC has been doing, however, is increasing our focus on career services, initiating a graduation survey, and increasing our transfer students services in hopes that we will be able to increase the job placement rates. Now, since this is a lagged measure, we have not been able to see whether these metrics have had an effect yet. We are hoping that some of the current legislation with the coordinating board will speed up this data cycle for us. So with that, we can see the strategies we're using are effective and are more effective than the strategies we were using 5 years ago. So we are on the right track and need to increase, hold the course, and again, keep our focus on student success. Questions?
Madam Chair, I've got a question.
Yes, Trustee Sheben?
So I appreciate you addressing the lack of availability of the 4-year transfer rate. Disappointing that the data hasn't caught up to reality, but it is what it is. I do want to anchor on that row, though, as I segue into a related question, which is what are we doing to get the word out about some of these really amazing improvements in the data? I have shared the 34% number with a number of people, and if they are in the know, immediately the eyebrows go up and they're kind of floored with how much that has improved. Early in my tenure, I saw, charts thrown around that showed us kind of near the bottom of the heap in that particular number. And 34% is very close, if not at peer leading, which I think either Austin Community College or potentially Lone Star were up there in that particular data set that I saw. But these numbers and these results have the power to change hearts and minds when folks are used to a lower level of performance from us. So just want to, curious what we're doing to get the word out to ensure that folks are dealing and thinking about the HCC of today and not the HCC of yesterday.
Well, one of the things I can talk about is at the Chancellor's Community Partnership meetings. We really need to get the word out to our communities and to our ISD industry partners. And so at the events like the partnership meetings, really talking about the success of our students and the impact that we make starts to spread the word. We certainly have done the articles and the advertorials in the Houston Chronicle to get that kind of word out. And of course, when we talk to business industry and our advisory boards, and when we talk to our 4-year partners with articulation agreements, we can talk about our student success. And we can and there's actually even deeper student success data than you see here. And that has resulted in more colleges coming to us and wanting these partnerships and being enthusiastic about co-enrollment and HCC students, because their experience with our students is positive, and so they want our students to come because they do succeed.
And corollary to that, there's so many new entrants to the greater Houston area economy that are on their way over the next couple of years who will not be familiar with us. And I mean, I'm sure that they'll fire up their laptops and pull up the databases, but if those databases are stale, that doesn't help us at all.
Right.
So I don't know if it's the governor's office or the partnership or whomever would be good to make sure that they're up with the latest and the greatest so that these businesses coming in can choose wisely with their community college partners as they envision workforce. Same question, but from the flip side, good to see the improvements in the numbers, but disappointed that it's taken so long around academic and workforce placement. I know that that is a big focus item for the partnership this year, and just curious what we're doing to use that as a call to action, because I know that there's lots of businesses coming in, lots of jobs to be had, but I think Steve Keen mentioned this at a recent event. What we're missing is potentially connectivity to ensure that the students that need a job can find a job because the employers certainly need them. So just curious what we're doing in that space.
Well, I think, let's see, James, do you want, I can answer that, but we could also bring up James Mabel, who is our Director of Career and Placement Services. One thing that I can say is that we are increasing our internships, our apprenticeships, the work-based learning, and that, of course, connects students directly to employers and increases their sort of social capital around finding a job and knowing who to talk to about a job.
Chair. Hello, can you guys hear me? Look, you can't hear me? No? Okay.
Yes. Trustee Lettengary. Trustee Lettengary. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem. How you guys doing? Listen, I'm hearing what you're saying, Sean, but I think a real integral part in all of this too is us to make sure that our community are more aware of what's really transpiring. Because in reality, you said you want people, what you were talking about, it would help people to understand who Houston Community College is and that we are here. But we need to really make sure in our districts locally that our constituents know who we are. And, and those who are paying taxes, homeowners, they need to know who we are and what we can actually do to help them benefit. Because if they know, then it'll help us grow. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Trustee Lettengary. Anyone else? Trustee Sheben, would you like to continue?
Mabel?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chancellor, members of the board. To answer your question, Trustee, there are a couple of initiatives we're working on to ensure students are successful transitioning from HCC. One of those is I think Dr. Burge mentioned that we have a graduation application. And the significance of that graduation application is that our students are telling us their employment status. And as a matter of fact, they're telling us their plans to transfer and where they want to end up as far as a destination university. And we're looking at that data, and our career and transfer services teams are following up with those students directly and offering support to those students, especially those who've indicated that they're unemployed. That is a new development. I can tell you, I've been in my role for 7 years here, and we've had a survey. And as you may know with the survey, sometimes students may not respond to those. And the graduation application is actually required. So all students who are applying for graduation are filling out that information and letting us know their employment status and their transfer plans. And our team members are following up with them accordingly and offering support. We're also inviting those individuals to career fairs, transfer fairs, using a system that you may have heard in what was mentioned earlier, and that's Career Hub. And Career Hub is a tool that it's a conduit for us to connect with companies. Companies can log in and post jobs. It's where companies also request interview schedules, as well as info sessions and other types of activities that lead to job placement. But the graduation application is a new development, and it's an opportunity for us to really zero in and hone in on students who've said that they're unemployed, because those students fill out that graduation application sometimes months in advance. And so that's our opportunity to connect with them well in advance, and sometimes in a previous semester, to make them aware of upcoming events that are conducive to them being successful transitioning from HCC.
I appreciate that response and the additional context. It's great to hear that we've stood up a new data set in the graduation application. Hopefully there's a way that we can share the data, especially for those students that don't yet have a job lined up, so that the community broadly can help them get there. So thank you so much
A
for that
good
answer.
point, Trustee Sheehan. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I wanted to comment. I also wanted to piggyback on what Trustee Cynthia Langton Gary said about, it's one of the things that I know that we need to do more of is promote our programs. You know, we keep saying we have beautiful facilities and we know what we have, but our community still does not. So the question is, how can we go and promote these programs? What else can we do? You know, we have people that are going out there meeting, the high schools are meeting, but yet we're still not bringing them in. So I continue to say that we need to do some different type of marketing to bring them out, because we have great programs, but if they're not coming in, and, you know, like these numbers, they look great, but, you know, we want to see them at graduation as well. And, you know, we hear from some of these students that the difficulties that they have getting here or registering. And so we've always also said we got to find a quick way and improvement on when they're registering and make it quick and set and swift. And that way they can come in and take the classes and graduate and get those jobs that they need so badly. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Chancellor?
thank you very, very much. I'd like to make a comment as well. Dr. Burridge indicated that we have the program advisory committees, and these program advisory committees are affiliated with the various industries that we work closely with. But one of the additional initiatives that we are working on is ensuring that we have influencers throughout our communities, all 9 trustee districts, that will serve on an advisory committee. And these are influencers who will have those connections to various other groups within the community, whether they're chambers, whether they are multi-service center employees, et cetera, who will then be able to share that information broadly about all of the opportunities that are available at our colleges. And so once again, this is not to interfere at all with the work of our Board of Trustees, but it will tend to enhance exactly what is being addressed with respect to how we get the word out to the total community. But in addition to that, we have the social media campaigns as well that are working extraordinarily well through our communications division. We have the HCC TV that has over 700,000 subscribers. And then, of course, many of our students are also serving as ambassadors, that through the social media and through their networks, they're sharing that information also with our constituents.
I like the idea of the ambassadors. I think that's so important. My son is interviewing for high school for next year, and on this particular school, I was just so impressed. It was the students that led the tours and the explaining about the courses, and it was just very powerful. I mean, it was the adults stood back and the students took it and ran with it, and it just made a big difference for my son and for me as a parent. So, yeah, I think that's great. Anything else regarding this particular item, the KPI update? If there are none, we'll move to item C, which is the fall 2024 completion update. Dr. Ford Fisher?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members of the Board Committee, this report provides a fall 2024 completion update and also provides a comparison of fall 2024 to 2023. And with your permission, Madam Chair, Dr. Burridge, Dr. Deal, and Dr. Perez will provide a synopsis and respond to questions. Dr. Burridge, once again, please.
Thank you, Chancellor, trustees. So today we're going to provide a very brief update on the awards that were conferred after fall of 2024. So essentially, the way that the House Bill 8 funding works is that we are funded for associates, certificates, and then the occupational skills awards and institutional credentials leading to licensure and certification, ICLCs, in both standard and high demand fields. You can see that across almost every category, the number of awards that were conferred increased. And in fact, HCC students earned 572 more awards in fall 2024 than we conferred in fall 2023. So we are on track to eclipse our total from last year. And so thank you to the faculty, the staff, and some of that is due to the increased retention of students. We gave you a sense over time of what awards look like. Our biggest semester, of course, is always the spring. Spring is a canonical graduation semester. We also confer generally more awards in summer than in fall. Again, the fall and summer are fairly close. And with that, I will open the floor for questions.
Any questions? Anyone?
I don't have any questions.
No?
Just not a question, but
Trustee Sheehan?
just a kudos. 30% increase in year-on-year fall semester or fall-on-fall awards and completions. That's phenomenal. I mean, that is such a good outcome, and I know that's not a data point, that's a trend. And I probably gush more than I should as a trustee, but I know like everybody put their back into this one, and the reason that we've moved those numbers so quickly is because every single person on the HCC team played a part in making it happen. So just want to say thank y'all so much. There's just such a huge improvement, and the city needs it. I mean, the city's booming. There's tons of companies moving in. They need trained workforce, and y'all are making it happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trustee. Thank you so much.
If there aren't any other questions, I do want to thank the Chancellor. We had a really good meeting, the Academic Affairs meeting. I will continue to send emails to all trustees for input before each meeting. And I just want to thank you. You took what we talked about, and in the way that it was presented and how it was presented made a big difference for me as well, because I'm very visual, auditory, and all of it, and I understood it. It's on.
May I make a Madam Chair, one question, one comment?
Oh, yes, yes. Trustee Lenton Gary?
I just want to, you made the statement that you reach out to the trustees to see if there's any particular thing they want to discuss in your committee. And I want to say thank you for that, because when I first received it, I said, you know what, this is really appreciated. I learned something from that. So I thank you for that. And Trustee Cheevan, I just want to thank you for the comments you made, because I concur with the comments you made.
Thank you, Trustee Lenton Gary. Appreciate you. Right. There aren't any other questions or comments. The Academic Affairs Committee has now adjourned at
2:14 p.m.
All righty. Thank you.
Trustees, minors on campus are a key risk identified in the annual enterprise risk management assessment that you saw in a previous meeting. The associated mandatory reporting requirements and supervision requirements for minor students on campus are different from managing adult students. The presentation aims to provide an update of the policies and procedures established to ensure HCC makes the safety and well-being of minor students a priority. HCC regulations require background checks of all employees since HCC has minors on our campuses. HCC adheres to state and federal guidelines to protect minors from harm. So HCC's minor policies on campus can be found on slide 3. And it refers to unaccompanied minors and relatives on HCC property and HCC's obligation to provide a safe and enjoyable learning and working environment for its students and employees. It restricts minors and relatives, or minors or relatives requiring special care from being on campus unless they are supervised by an adult or by a responsible adult. This does not apply to students enrolled or those participating in college-sponsored events. The Risk Management Group, led by Robert McCracken and the Office of General Counsel, have worked together to establish protocols when dealing with minors on campus, such as dual credit students, the drop-in daycare children, or special events like the annual spelling bee or robotics high school competitions. A work group was formed to create a matrix focusing on events dealing with minors on campus, which is here on slide 6, is what you're seeing. The chart identifies the type of event and determines the party responsible for ensuring the safety of any minors. And then slide 7 is the checklist that is utilized when minors are on campus. While the presentation does not address human trafficking, it is considered when dealing with minors on campus. HCC counselors are licensed professional counselors and are required by the Texas Licensure Professional Counselors Board to complete a human trafficking training module every 2 years as part of their licensure renewal process. Counseling and Ability Services offers educational sessions on human trafficking 3 times a year that's open to faculty, staff, and students. The spring 2025 session was hosted by The Landing, which is an anti-human trafficking organization in Houston. The presentation focused on raising awareness and educating the participants on the prevalence of the human trafficking nationally and specifically in the Houston area. They provide information on the risk factors and the red flags associated with human trafficking. A list of the national and local resources is included in every presentation to facilitate help seeking and referrals. The HCC Cares and Counseling websites also host a list of resources focused on human trafficking. The HCC Counseling and Ability Services has distributed posters to all of our HCC campuses on human trafficking that include a list of internal and external support services, such as the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The posters also provide information on human trafficking and its prevalence, as well as the red flags and signs to assist with recognizing potential incidents. In conclusion, HCC will continue to focus on ongoing training and process reviews to ensure a safe experience for minors, parents, and HCC employees. Thank you, and the team is here to address any questions you may have.
Committee members, are there any questions? There are no questions. Thank you so much for this report, because our intent as a board is to increase the number of students for dual credit and early college high school enrollment. So having this standard presented in the report was very, very important. And thank you so much for having the direct discussion about human trafficking, because I realize that although we consider our campuses safe, human trafficking is a very sophisticated system. And a lot of people are trafficked through their colleges and universities. And so it is very good to know that we are proactive and we have a robust system in place so that we can learn to recognize it. So thank you very much. There are no questions. Trustee Laredo.
just good information. So how do we make sure that it's going out to our faculty, staff, employees?
But as I indicated, some of the presentations we have, our faculty, staff, and employees are invited, and students as well, to those sessions. So we have various sessions throughout the campuses, and then we have posters as well that are at each of our campuses, giving them additional information in terms of what kinds of things to look out for. So and when it comes to any activity, as you saw that checklist, that's handled through our college operations office at each of our locations. So they ensure that we're following the processes that we've established to ensure the safety of all of our minors.
Thank you so much. There are no more questions, and we really appreciate the standard that has been raised for this. If we're going to increase the number of minors on our campuses, and I do believe we're doing something this summer to encourage minors to come.
Absolutely.
Then we will, I think this makes sure that we will be very prepared. Thank you so much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
There are no more items on the agenda, and there are no closed session items. So the audit committee meeting is adjourned at
2:40 p.m.
Governance Committee for April 2, 2025 will now come to order at. This meeting was called for the purposes listed on the duly posted meeting notice. I will be chairing today's Governance Committee meeting on behalf of Trustee Reichart. The other committee members are Trustee Dave Wilson and alternate Trustee Lola Davies. A citizen desiring to appear before the Board of Trustees shall complete the hearing of citizens form 24 hours prior to the meeting and file said application with the Board Services Office. There are no citizens signed up to speak before the Board Governance Committee today. All right, we will be pulling item A, proposed board bylaws revision to Article F, Section 1, and we'll proceed directly to item B, board expenditures report for fiscal year 2025. This is a report item. No action is required. Dr. Ford Fisher will introduce the item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board committee. This is a report item, as the chair indicated, regarding board expenditures for fiscal year 2025 to reflect expenditures from September 1, 25 through February 28, 25. And with your permission, Mr. Chair, Ms. Sharon Wright will respond to questions. Ms. Wright?
Yes, Chancellor, she stepped up. She stepped away for a moment.
Okay.
She's on her way back down now.
Okay, very, very good.
Thank
Are there
you.
questions, Mr. Chair?
Trustees, any questions? No. I don't have any questions. All right. Was there a presentation that we wanted to wait for? Or?
It's not a question, but just a comment on the board expenditures. It's that we were looking at the budget, and we were just wanted the trustees to be aware that we might have to make some cuts, but we all have to come together and agree on it to conferences that we go. Usually it's like, we have 10 listed, but in previous years, we've cut down, maybe to 5 and do a national, a local, and then another regular one. So that was just the question, that if we wanted to be aware and look at it. The same thing is expenditures when we sponsor events, that we want to make sure that we're present, and we know that emergencies come up and we can't be there, but if we can let board services know, or make sure that somebody takes our place to be present, that would also help as well. So we're just looking at being more cost effective among ourselves. Sharon's there.
May I make a comment, please? This, Trustee Landon Gary. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I want to just piggyback on what Madam Chair stated. I strongly agree with her, because there are times when we have conferences where some of the information is repetitive. And if we have been privy to receiving that information at one conference, I don't think we just, we should just go to that conference when it's actually information that we've already received, because, one conference has new trustee orientation. Now, I would not need to go to that conference because I've had that orientation. But I do think we need to be mindful of what conferences we attend, because we talk about college, the expenditures of the college, and we're not paying attention to our expenditures as a board. And I've been on past boards, and I've heard people say, well, they can pay for our travel because we don't get paid. But to me, if we're going to adhere to our fiduciary responsibilities, we still need to take that into consideration, how much money we're spending on travel. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I welcome the chair's comments about us taking a closer look at how we as a board spend money, because we need to, I'd like to see the whole an efficiency study run from top to bottom at this institution. And as a board, we need to lead by action rather than talking. And we probably do need to set some limits on that and make sure that there's value received for that money. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none.
Well, I'm just introducing the report for item B regarding the expenditures from September 21st, 24 through February 28, 25. The total expenditures for travel and the BACA fund, which is the board account for community activity affairs, totals $49,102. Of that breakout, as noted in your attachment, $38,602 for travel, and then $10,500 is for BACA expenditures. Sorry, entertain any questions if there are any.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Please do.
Sharon, is it possible for us to use our BACA to maybe contribute to an activity that one of the college campuses could possibly be having, and we just be in addition to
That we
a bigger event?
We have had some occurrences where there was a contribution to activities on the campus. One was, I think, to cover support of that activity, but we will still need board council to review the activity. So once you fill out the BACA fund, we will send it through the normal procedure of a review to make certain that it's an eligible activity.
Okay, and if I would do that, it would I would complete the form and say the funds is going to whatever event to whomever is sponsoring that event.
Right. If it's a college sponsoring the event, we can transfer those funds if approved to that college to support that event.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
All right, last chance for questions. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned at
3:09 p.m.
3:35 p.m.
This meeting was called for the purpose listed on the duly posted meeting notice. The other committee members are Trustee Lalu Davies, Trustee Sean Cheevan, and alternate Trustee Adriana Tamez. A citizen desiring to appear before the Board of Trustees shall complete the hearing of citizens form 24 hours prior to the meeting and file said application with the Board Services Office. There are no citizens signed up to speak before External Relations Committee today. We have one item coming before the committee. It's item A, which is a report on external relations activities. This is a report item. No action is required. Dr. Ford Fisher will introduce the item. Hi, Dr. Ford Fisher.
Hello, Madam Chair. Thank you so very, very much. Members of the Board Committee, this item is a report on the external relations activities to include an update on the 89th Texas regular legislative session. And with your permission, Madam Chair, I will ask Vice Chancellor Young to provide an update and respond to questions. Dr. Young.
Thank you, Madam Chancellor. Members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to share with you an External Relations Committee update. We have remaining 62 days in the 89th legislative session. March 14th was the final bill filing date, and once that date arrived and passed, the session's pace has picked up tremendously. The principal item that emerges from the legislative session for us, community colleges, is mostly appropriations. And so we'll start out by just sharing with you, we're working with our subject matter experts here in the college to track and monitor bills, and we are tracking 849 bills from the 89th legislative session. Community college appropriations for the 26-27 biennium, you see here, is $2.4 billion. HB1 is not the bill that will move from an appropriation standpoint, but rather the committee substitute of Senate Bill 1 for the 26-27 biennium is $2.4 billion. And this is formula appropriations that includes the base tier under our new formula model, performance tier dynamic adjustment, and performance tier settle up. So those are the components of the bill. So this is formula funding, not non-formula funding. Also an appropriations item we find in House Bill 500, a supplemental appropriation of $89,500,000. And this relates to supplemental funding for community colleges by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board for the purpose of past growth that occurred back during September of 2024 period. And that's projected growth in funding outcomes. So we're picking up $89 million, $89.5 million. You're familiar with the financial aid and SWIFT transfer that emerged from House Bill 8 in the 88th regular session. And from those dollars, you see $4.4 million to HCC, all community colleges, $70 million, until all other institutions, that is general academic institutions, and technical colleges, $79.6 million. These dollars, again, was created from HB8 and provide funding for public institutions of higher education to offer dual credit courses to educationally disadvantaged students. Each year preceding the legislative session, the institution has an opportunity to submit a legislative appropriations request. HCC's Regional Response Emergency Training Center for the 26-27 biennium has $2.375 million in both budget bills, in both HB1 and SB1. And those bills had movement this past week. I'll talk a little bit about that as we proceed through the presentation. Those dollars are in both budget bills, so that's a good sign, anticipating that these items will be heard by the Senate and the committee substitute. But $2.375 million is in the base budget bill for Houston Community College. Again, in a good place. HCC filed an exceptional item request subsequent to the LAR, the Legislative Appropriations initial filing. The door was open for us to do that. And those dollars to the tune of $56 million were put in Article 11. That is not inside the base budget bill, which would be HB1 or SB1. In this case, it would be SB1. But those dollars we're working with a member of the legislature to advance these dollars forward, a member that you would know, your former colleague, has been assisting us with this effort. And what we like to say today is we are keeping this initiative alive. It is still alive and well, and we'll see where we end up. Anticipate that we're going to be going to conference committee to talk about these dollars. So
Ramel, that's great to know. She's working on our behalf already.
She's working on our behalf already. She's been very, very helpful to us. So we're most appreciative.
That's great.
So key bills. I indicated we're tracking over 800 bills, and we're meeting now with our subject matter experts throughout the college, whether that be instructional services, Texas Public Information Act, board governance, elections, a host of categories of information that we are working with our subject matter experts on. HB1 has been filed. It's introduced and referred to Committee on House Appropriations. The last action was on February 25th. Do not anticipate that this bill will move forward. Rather, we indicated earlier that SB1 will be the bill that moves forward, and it was passed by the Senate. It was set on the House calendar for April 10th. So next week, they'll hear the Senate Bill 1 on April the 10th. That's Thursday. HB 500. It's set on the House calendar. It will be heard on the 10th next week, next Thursday, and that's at $89 million, 89.5. And there's no companion bill to HB 500, so we're indicating that here, not applicable. There are some companion bills, like in the example here, HB1, SB1 is the companion to SB1, and vice versa. But no companion bill to HB 500, and it's set on the House calendar, meaning that the House will take it up. We'll listen to it, hear the deliberations on it on next Thursday. 2856, relating to a study concerning feasibility of implementing a statewide coordinating clinical training placement that pertains to our work that we do over at the Coleman College, and quite frankly, work that we do here at 3100 Main. That item is pending Higher Education Committee from April 1st, so that means it was heard. It still remains in committee until voted out. So that's an agenda item, a policy agenda item that we have here for the 89th legislative session for HCC. Likewise, the companion bill by Senator Zaffarini, it was introduced and referred to committee, Senate Education K through 16. That's a new committee name. Last movement it had was on March the 17th. So we're focusing our attention on 2856 by Representative Donna Howard from Austin. Relating to state employment opportunities for individuals who do not hold bachelor's degrees. So we obviously have a lot of students with associate degrees. Our students, if these bills should pass, or one of these bills should pass, would have an opportunity to work for state government, not necessarily having to have a baccalaureate degree, but an associate degree would be sufficient to be considered for employment. And you see both bills here. Last movement in the House was on March 27th. It was introduced and referred to committee, has not been heard yet. At 1041 by Parker in the Senate was introduced and referred to Committee of Senate Business and Commerce. So in February, anticipate that 3923 will be the moving bill. HB 2110 is what we identify as the cleanup bill for HB 8. And it talks about dual credit, how our students will be able to receive funds that are economically disadvantaged, and it also places the governing board, that is you serving members of the HCC governing board, shall exempt payment of tuition and required fees from dual credit. So that's among other things that this bill focuses on. It's been reported from committee as substituted, and then 1786, I saw it move since I've provided you the update earlier today, so it moved again. Not sure exactly where it is, but it was voted favorably from committee as substituted. Not sure what happened today, but yesterday, that was our movement. Since we last met back in February, we had the opportunity to identify who was serving us from an appropriation standpoint in the House. And the members from our delegation include these members: Representative Armando Wiley, or Representative Wiley has been a mainstay on appropriations. He's highly regarded in that space. Representative Jean Wu, Representative Mano Dayala, and Representative Lauren A. Simmons. So these people are folks from our delegation and have been instrumental in helping us navigate the waters, particularly with, we were talking about the Workforce Program Growth Initiative. We've been talking with Representative Wiley and Representative Simmons and the remainder of the members, but we've had Representative Simmons to try to offer up an amendment for us. So we're working our initiatives through our local delegation, in addition to other members. Likewise, we've had some additional folks to get committee assignments since we last met in February. And our second line, the last picture on the in that slide depicts Representative Charlene Ward Johnson, your former colleague. She's on higher education. That's a pretty good assignment for first going to the legislature. That doesn't happen often. So she made it to higher education. So that's a good thing for us.
All right.
Yeah, really good thing. And the Chancellor and we had an opportunity to speak with Representative Suleiman Lalani earlier in the legislative session, pre-session. And so he, too, is on higher ed. So those are our members, our go-to members. Not that we don't talk to the remainder of the members, but these are people who know who we are, know what we do pretty intimately. And so we tend to go to them for assistance.
Yeah.
Again, 62 days remaining, and the pace is moving quickly. We appreciate your help, and thank you for the opportunity to share the information about our legislative initiatives and agenda items. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer any of those that I might be able to do so on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ramil, you
Yes, ma'am.
stated that you need our help.
Always.
Okay.
Always.
What do you want us to do?
Well,
Reach out to
we will reach out through
the legislator?
Yeah, we'll reach out through the Office of the Chancellor and Board Services on items that may come up where we might need you all to make calls. And so as we get down to when those committees start meeting, the conference committee, we may need to have some calls made. So we'll reach out to you, let you know what the facts and circumstances are surrounding from an appropriation standpoint.
Keep us apprised. Okay.
We will.
Sounds great.
Speaking of which, Madam Chair, on a weekly basis, we try to keep you apprised and sort of, I'll call it, just short of real time of what's happening through the WAB. So we work with the Chancellor to make sure that we put that together to make sure that you have some understanding about where we are, what we're doing, and what we need to do.
Yes, it's very helpful. And, but if it's something directly that's not included, in that, and you need the trustees, just reach out.
And Madam Chair, if you would indulge me just for a brief moment to acknowledge Dejan Grigsby, who's been diligently working. Dejan, are you in the room? She's been just really cranking it out, making it work, and I've been challenged. So she's working me. So it's been good. So I really appreciate Dejan, and she's doing a great job.
She's a great person.
Absolutely, great experience.
Madam Chair, I've got a question.
Okay, Trustee Cheatham.
Yeah, just really intrigued about, I opened up the HB 2110 text, and it looks like a decently long bill. Would it be possible for y'all to send us kind of a primer? And I know the situation is fluid, as it always is in session, but just an overview of what's in the range of possibility on that.
In fact, the bill analysis, I think, now has posted, so we'll be able to see that where you're not having to read it from, it's in layman's terms, so you're not having to read through all the bill language. Dejan, that's posted now still? So we can do that. In fact, we'll have it in the weekly activity bulletin if that's okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, that's fine. That'll work.
That is my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Great report. And I just want to say I sincerely appreciate you and your team for providing this update to us. And at first, when I started looking at it, I was like, oh my God, I'm a little confused. But then you put notes in. You add your notes to let us know exactly what the numbers on this page, these pages mean.
Well,
And I
thank you.
appreciate that.
If we can improve our work, just let us know and we'll accommodate it. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you
a great
so
day.
much. Any other questions, trustees? If there are no questions, the External Relations Committee meeting is adjourned at,
3:51 p.m.
hey, see you guys in 9 minutes.
4:00 p.m.
All for the purposes as listed on the duly posted meeting notice. A citizen desiring to appear before the Board of Trustees shall complete the hearing of citizen form 24 hours prior to the meeting and file said application with the Board Services Office. No citizens are signed up to speak before the Committee of the Whole. Is there a motion to approve item A, monthly investment reports, financial statements, and budget reviews for January and February 2025?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the board. This item is a recommendation to the Board of Trustees to accept the investment reports, financial statements, and budget review for the month of January and February 2025. And with your permission, Madam Chair, I request Dr. Sherry Hahn to come to the podium to provide an overview and address all questions. Dr. Hahn.
Good afternoon, Madam Board Chair, Madam Chancellor, and trustees. I will call your attention to the investment report, which is positive again this month. We have approximately $2 million in January that it's unrealized gain, but we're doing well, and roughly $3 million in unrealized gain for February. Do you have any questions about the investments? I can talk a little bit about the process for managing those if you like.
Trustees, any questions?
Yeah, what's our weighted average cost, average return for the month of February?
I can get that for you, sir.
Oh, okay. I've been asking about this, so it's not anything new. It's just I think it's important that we continue to track it. The last Fed meeting, there was a discussion about delaying the reduction in the target rate. And so that's still anticipated that there will be 2 rate reductions later in the year. So I think it's important that when we're considering these monthly investment reports, kind of like last year, trying to time, the repositioning of the investments that we're making to make sure when we know an interest drop might be imminent, we would want to reinvest those assets to precede that. So I just want to make sure that we prioritize that going forward because that's a real important thing for us to track.
Thank you for that comment. We certainly will get back to you on that. We pay attention to what the Fed does, and we know that we heard they wanted 2 reductions possible, 25 basis points each before the fiscal year ends, actually before the calendar year ends. But there was an unexpected push in inflation for February. It was a 0.4% increase, 0.2% I believe were goods, and 0.4% for services. So I think at this point, the Fed is sort of stuck not knowing what to do either. They're holding their rates. They're not going to change them at this point, but we pay attention to it. And we can go into greater detail about how we manage our investments daily and weekly. And I'll provide the information you're asking for.
Is that the information that's listed here under the weighted average interest rate under fiscal impact?
Yes.
That's to your question.
Right. So essentially, thank you, Madam Chair. So there's sort of a downward trend, right? We were 5.08% last year, 4.3% last month. I'm not sure what that's referencing. I'm assuming it's January, and 4.27% for February. So obviously, the markets being what they are, I just think it's important they were thinking about that. And it also calls the question, I don't know the last time I think it was in the fall when we last heard from our financial advisor, but I think it would also be important for us to hear from them probably by May as a way to understand, okay, what are the different securities we're invested in and how are the experts looking at rebalancing that portfolio given the realities today and what we think might happen by Q3 of this year. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on the investments? In terms of the income statement and balance sheet, basically you will see some variance on the income statement for the state appropriations portion. That's because we receive funds in October, February, and June, so those even out as the remainder of the fiscal year proceeds. Likewise, for the ad valorem taxes, we see those come in January and February mostly, so we'll see those taper off, so those should be balanced by year end. And there was an increase in the marketing campaign, and that's because we put great effort forth to advertise in January, and those vendors billed us in February. So that was that main increase. The tuition appears down in the monthly column, but that's only the monthly. When you look at the cum, we're doing just the way we expected we would, so no problem there. In terms of the balance sheet, just two items I would call your attention to, and that is the reserve. For January, we had 896 million, and in February, we're up to 965 million. And we are prepared to shortly send an answer through the TI process that explains what we do in terms of managing those excess funds for year end, in terms of kind of short-term purchases or needs and longer-term bigger ticket items, which would be a board request. But we'll send that answer in writing through Sharon's office.
The board, pardon me, that balance sheet that you referenced, which page is that on?
Let me get it for you. We show the balance sheet by fund on page 8.
The presentation only has 4 pages.
Do you not have the Houston Community College balance sheet by fund?
Oh, the
Printed
financial
items.
statement.
Page 8?
Let me see here.
Let's see if it's in here.
It's in there. It's in our book, and it's numbered
Yes.
page 8.
Yes.
Okay, it's page 10 of the PDF, page 8 at the bottom. Thank you. It's for the February financial statement. Thanks.
Any other questions? Trustee Wilson, you look like you have a question. No? Okay.
Madam Chair, just one
Oh.
comment. And Dr. Hahn, I know you're new and you're working improvements to this process, and I very much appreciate your efforts in that space. As you're looking at your next iteration of these forms, I think it'd be helpful to seasonalize the monthly expectations versus kind of having it be flatly applied across the academic year. Right now, there's on slide 3 of the main presentation, there's just a lot of self-correcting by year end.
Yeah, we're working on those, and that ties into GASB 103, which will be effective this year. It's not effective yet. But what I've asked the team to do is to be specific on the explanations, because just saying it'll straighten out by year end doesn't really give you any information that explains the reason for the variance.
Yeah, and I know a lot of those variances are that, so the state appropriations, that's lumpy and it's timing.
Right.
And if in the future for next year, if we could clean up kind of those timing effects so that we can see what was expected in that month versus what actually hit, I just think that would be more meaningful for us, because there's a lot of squinting and cross-referencing that, that's just expected for this month, so. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that comment. Any other questions on
Questions?
financial statements?
Seeing none?
No questions from me, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Seeing none, then we're ready to vote. Board members, please cast your vote.
Aaron, that's yes for me.
Receive.
Sharon, that's yes for me as well.
Yes for me, Sharon.
Okay, if I can just for the record get names. Trustee.
Trustee Linton Gary.
Yes, and then
Yes.
Trustee Patterson.
received. Voting has concluded. The motion passed with a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. We will move to item B, Budget Workshop Number 4, Preliminary fiscal year 2026 operating and other budgets. This is a report item. No action is required. Dr. Ford Fisher will introduce the item.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is our workshop number 4 that we are presenting to the board for discussion, for your review and feedback. The discussion will focus on preliminary fiscal year 2026 operating and other budgets. And with your permission, Madam Chair, I invite Dr. Sherry Hahn to present the preliminary budget and respond to questions. Dr. Hahn? Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to review this material. We've been working on it steadily, and this presentation provides all the piece parts. I know previously there were comments about the difficulty of seeing one section at a time, but we're at a good point where everything is kind of pulled together, at least for the first view. Again, the topics are similar to what we've seen before, the timeline and the various components. And here we are at April for the scenarios. Oops. For the revenue scenario, we are looking at reducing our initial projections by 2% to accommodate all of the unknowns we have in the environment, both federally and in terms of state funding formula changes, which are not clearly known yet. So we are projecting from FY25 134 million down to 131 million. And we reduced international students by 50% based on what we had seen occur during the COVID years, where we lost approximately 50% of our international students. The next piece looks at state appropriations. This is sort of a primer on the base tier. We're generally never eligible for the base tier because it's only provided, it represents 5% of the total amount of funding. The formula funding, performance-based funding, based on whether we have enough income from tax base and tuition to cover our operating and instructional costs, and we do. So we're not afforded anything additional in the base tier. Now, when we come to the remainder of the performance tier, we're looking at the base credential of value, the premium credential of value when our students complete their degrees and certificates on time or before on time, and then the high demand amount for the high demand fields. Those are the rates, and then in the green boxes, you see what the estimated weighted outcome completions are. The sum total of all of this results in roughly $58 million of revenue. This is a current view as of now. We know that this may change as credentials of value change a little bit. And we also know that in May, we may get an update on the quantities from the state. So this is our snapshot at the moment. Looking at the next piece, special funding and fast funding. FY24 and 25 are actuals. FY26 is based on a 3-year average of 23, 24, and 25. And again, we're looking at an update from the THECB in May. But this again shows a slight decrease. We're trying to be really conservative on the revenue piece so that we don't wind up in trouble with our overstated expenses during the year. We go from roughly 69 million to 65 million on this page. And then the next leg of the stool in terms of revenue is the tax scenario piece, and we've provided several options here. On each slide, we show what the current profile is, if you will, of taxes in the current scenario. We show the total tax rate, the M&O piece, the debt rate. Then we show the profile of the exemptions as they currently are in the top box. Then we show the estimated growth in the base property, which was roughly 1.2%, and the dollars that represents. And then in the budgeted revenue, we show what we are working with currently. In option 1, we are maintaining the tax rate. We are increasing M&O as the debt amount decreases, so they're not losing out on anything there. We're not changing the exemptions in any way. We're keeping it at the greater of 5,000 or 17%. We see a growth in base property of roughly 2.2%, and that would bring in $6 billion and result in a roughly 4% increase in estimated revenue, bringing us to $233 million. So that's how these kind of scenarios work in the boxes. Option 2 looks at, instead of maintaining the tax rate, it's a decrease in the tax rate. We'd maintain M&O as the debt decreases, no change in exemptions, increase in the base rate, and yield only $229 million, which is only a 2% increase. So those are the two options. Then the third option looks at decreasing the tax rate again, changing the exemptions in that box to 20% instead of 17%. That would essentially reduce the property base rate by $4 billion. We would get a 1% decrease down to $221 million. So we're giving you several options to consider, and we can look at others if you prefer. The next piece is really the important part as far as we're concerned, where the rubber really meets the road, the expense piece. We did basic trending on all of our expenses, and based on that, we would go from $431 million this year, and this year is a combination of half actual, half projected, to $439 million, but we felt that just averages wouldn't tell enough of the story here. So we continued on, and we looked specifically at salary and benefits. In order to remain competitive in the market and retain the talent we have and attract new talent as we need it, we are recommending a 2% increase, COLA increase for full-time employees, faculty, librarian staff, and a 1.5% increase, again trying to be fiscally conservative, for part-timers, including adjuncts. Because of the increases, the benefits would go up by about roughly $1 million. Another impact which we felt was really important that the faculty had requested, and we felt strongly about, to agree with, we're going from basically a 4-tier longevity structure to a 6-tier structure, and also increasing the amounts per step. So currently, after 5 years, a person would receive $75 a month. After 35 years, that would jump to $175 under the current scenario. In the future, if accepted scenario, the 5-year would increase from 75 to 100, and the 35-plus year would increase from 175 to 250 a month. So we're recommending an increase there, and there's an error on this page in terms of percent change. It should be 3%, not 4.7. So my apologies about that. The other piece of expenses that's really critical is we have known commitments that are multi-year that can't be changed. We need to continue on with them. There are either compliance requirements, contract requirements, affiliation requirements, accreditation requirements, and we've listed it in two different ways, roughly both sides the same, roughly $8 million. And you can see the expense types and divisions that they apply to here. So based on that information, we are presenting two different scenarios, a flat budget, again, because we are juggling so many unknowns, and we don't want to get out over our skis and be overly generous projecting revenue that we may not receive in full. So we're keeping the budget flat at $465 million. Now, part of that includes an aspect of deferred maintenance, which is really key. We've done a facilities and deferred maintenance study. You haven't seen all of that yet, but we've worked on it. This is a portion of what they would need to get some of the work done that's critical for this year. In addition, we were planning to use $10 million of reserves for high-demand short-term certificates so that we can quickly turn students into graduates and get funding from the state from performance funding. We think this is kind of the best use of our reserve funds as a one-time indulgence in order to get us over this year of unknowns and incredibly difficult circumstances, federally and from the state point of view. And on the right-hand side, you could see all the assumptions that went into this, building this. I wanted to point out that this scenario also includes only $1.5 million in network infrastructure replacement, and that's a reduction of $3.5 million from the prior year. And it's not that they don't need the additional funds, they do, but we're trying to, again, be very, very selective and strategic about what we purchase and what we actually need to spend. on, because we don't know what we're going to actually get in terms of revenue. And then the alternate scenario is a little more draconian. If your eyes glance down to the deferred maintenance and high demand short-term certificates toward the bottom, you'll notice 0 there for those in order to give us an even more stringent budget of $442 million. It's an alternative, but not a desirable one, because the deferred maintenance is really necessary to keep us safe and sound, and high demand short-term certificates is an investment in future enrollment. So it's silly not to have it. Right, and then we have the operating budgets. Fund 2 is the restricted budget, basically no changes to what we had previously here, no serious changes. Slightly, just staff expenses, 5%, total restricted expenditures changed by 5% in this scenario. The auxiliary is Fund 3. Net revenue expenses, a change of $2 million there. Again, the IT strategic plan and 5-year master plan has a lot of detail to it. We will be ready to present that shortly. What we are pointing out here is some of the needed upgrades and replacements of IT equipment that are aging off, that may not be supported anymore technically by the vendors, replacing security technology and instructional equipment that is also verging on obsolescence. So this is kind of the bare minimum of what we would need. Then we were considering contingency plans. We had a lot of different scenarios here, but just to be focused on it, we're saying that we should use reserves of any sort for very focused needs as a one-time infusion. And I am just asking that we don't consider using them as an ongoing source of operating revenue. I just don't think that's wise. And then finally, we will, these are just some samples of external factors. There are many more, as you heard from Dr. Young. Of the 800 some odd bills that are being considered currently, 200 plus of them, 25%, are tax-related bills, which could impact us in many different ways. So given all of that, what's happening on the federal side, well, we've lost the U.S. Department of Education, it seems. We might be losing Veterans Affairs support and services. That could impact our students. Customer service levels and funding. We've already seen a limitation of indirect research overhead to 15%. I think the impact of that was roughly $48,000. I don't know if there's any additional. Mid-year immediate funding changes could challenge us. So again, we're trying to be very conservative on the revenue side. International student fears may keep them from attending. They might be afraid to register, to enroll, to appear on campus. Again, if we have the same debacle we had last year with FAFSA availability being late, I don't know how that would impact us. Students mostly are on federal grants who attend here, so that would really be an impact. That would delay U.S. student enrollment. And then if we've noticed that if students don't get their FAFSA, if they don't get federal funding, even if dollars are available through the foundation, they're sort of demoralized. They don't feel like they can do any more to help themselves. So it's really an obstacle. And on the state side, I just list a number of different types of bills. Dr. Young went over them in much more depth, but there's a lot going on there that can impact us financially. And our commitment to you is in the event of any additional unforeseen events beyond what we're currently aware of, we will develop an impact analysis and an action plan and share that with leadership and the board. So I would just ask you to consider those two scenarios that we propose, the flat budget of $465 million or the more austere alternate budget of $442 million in operating revenue. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. That was very thorough. Trustees, any questions? Trustee
Madam
Sheba.
Chair, I don't have any questions, but I agree with you. It was very thorough, and I sincerely appreciate the hard work you put into this. And I think you've really made it clear and pretty explanatory, for us to understand, especially me, because I'm not very good at budgets. My husband can tell you that. So, but this was very clear for me.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're a work in process. We keep getting better. At least that's the goal.
Thank you. Trustee Schubert.
Thank you.
I just want to echo Trustee Lettengary's comment. Appreciate the thorough approach to this deck. I am having a hard time, though, reconciling the conservative approach in here with the incredible growth in student outcomes that we saw in the Academic and Student Affairs Committee earlier today. And I appreciate that there's a lag between this academic year's performance and HB8 funding, but it seems to assume flat revenue given 30% growth year on year in fall on fall awards. It seems too conservative. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to address, like, is there a middle ground? Is there a high scenario? It just seems like keeping that funding flat or docking it a little bit feels too conservative given the amazing work that's being done to ensure students continue to completion.
Well, we did actually consider another version of the scenarios, but with every passing day, the more unknowns that appeared on the horizon, the more worried we got, because we thought, once again, if revenues are too high, expenses will reach those same limits, and if those revenues don't materialize during the year, we'll have no way to recoup or prevent those expenses from rolling in. So, I mean, that was the thinking. We did have several scenarios, one more optimistic, one less optimistic, and so forth, but taking a second look at it, we thought it was worrisome. I'm just afraid to overcommit and then disappoint. On the other hand, we will recommend a process for dealing with surplus at year end so that we get a chance to use additional funds if we're lucky enough to have them and put them to good use. But in terms of baking them in, that was the only reason you see two things here.
I appreciate that perspective, but I think we run a risk in the opposite scenarios. If we post another year of strong enrollment growth, 6 to 8%, like we have seen for the last couple of years, we may find ourselves ill-prepared to serve those students that are entrusting us with their education. There's a risk, there's downside to being overly conservative in these estimates as well. Another question that I had, I appreciate, again, the granularity that you provided on slide 16. I feel like I say this a lot, so I just want to put myself on the record. I'm very concerned about the lack of spending in deferred maintenance. Y'all have heard me quote the $400 million amount before, and I won't spend too much time on that again, but to only put $15 million or less in when that clock is ticking to the end of the decade, again, feels to me ill-advised given the amount of the number of students that walk through our halls, and they deserve a safe, clean, properly functioning campus to learn in. Same thing on the IT side. Cutting that essential infrastructure, I appreciate we need a solid plan to ensure those dollars are spent wisely, and I'm looking forward to seeing that in a couple of months.
Yes.
But there's also the looming ERP upgrade on the horizon, which I'm assuming we would probably have to start implementation planning and work for that next academic year. In my experience, that runs at least in the 8 figures, and I don't see that anywhere in the budget currently. So there's a few landmines just in those two topics, not to mention the facility strategic work that I know was kicked off late last year. That could really stress this budget, and those costs aren't currently included in these figures on slide 16. So again, I'm concerned, so I'll give you an opportunity to respond to my concerns.
I hear them. We can provide additional data on what we know that we have not shared yet, hasn't been fully baked, but we have, I think, roughly, and Mr. McCracken can speak to this if I need correction here, but roughly, I think we estimated $44 million a year would be the need to keep up with basic maintenance. That means no big spikes. That means just maintaining things properly, 44 million. We couldn't afford it. Would you? So, okay, then 2 votes up. It's too much to absorb in the one budget year when so many other things are unknown. So that's the rationale for keeping it at this limited amount. In terms of IT, I think we have a 5-year projection of cost. We know the annual amount each year. Haven't seen that presentation yet. It's coming. But as I recall, it's around, and Mr. Jackson, I think it's around 11.8 million for FY26. Can't afford that full amount, so we cut it again just to do the essentials. Again, I'm trying to balance what we really need with what we will have available to us. But I hear your concern. I hear it.
And I appreciate that, and just especially on the ERP upgrade side, just having strong, modernized data foundations is key for us serving our students, and continuing to kick that can down the road really, really concerns me.
I just agree with you. We sit on it a lot, and I think it's just something we've done for a long time, and it's we sit on things.
Got two more, then I'll stop filibustering. Apologies, y'all. We had talked during the EC about having tuition assistance programs discussed in this presentation today. Was disappointed to see that those didn't make the cut on the presentation materials. And I appreciate there's a lot of uncertainty. It's a moving target in Austin. But I would, very much appreciate, and I guess I'll formally request to put it on the record, that we have that discussion in May in the committee of the whole, so we can really hit those potential tuition assistance opportunities head on. I do think some of the options that we've discussed could be a potential counterweight to some of the uncertainty that we're seeing coming out of the state and federal level. And again, that's another opportunity that my colleagues on the board have expressed a lot of support for in the past, and I think it deserves a discussion at the very least before we tie this budget up with a bow. So I'll pause and let you comment on that.
I will be happy to bring that back. The numbers may change because the environment's changed a little bit since they were first developed, but the Houston Reconnect would have required a $12 million scholarship investment. That made us a little nervous. It's a lot of money to spend. In the outer years, we would have gained revenue, we thought, but we're worried about this immediate coming year and all of the unknowns. So happy to bring all the material back, updated. No problem.
No, I appreciate that. And then my one final comment is Dr. Young very clearly laid out all the moving parts and pieces going on in Austin right now. Many of those, I think, would influence or inform your conservatism in some of these numbers. Just wanted to test with you that as the landscape begins to be clarified in Austin, that these numbers would be updated accordingly, so that as we in May and June wrestle with this, we'd have kind of the latest picture and hopefully a more optimistic picture as the uncertainty begins to translate into clarity.
Absolutely. We're counting on doing that work. This is the first blush.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns?
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
I have a series of questions.
Only have one.
You might want to go because I do have a number of questions that I want
Well,
to ask.
my question is that on the FAFSA, do we know how much we received on FAFSA this year?
I know that number, but I don't have it memorized, so I can get that for you.
Okay, compared to the previous year, only because it was running late, and so I heard from some students that they didn't get to turn it in. So I know that it's affected us this year, but I was just wanting to know the comparison, because we know that the following year, it's going to affect us even more. So that's
I will
my
get that for you. I believe, if memory serves, roughly 2/3 of our students receive federal grant money, so it's a substantial number of them that depend on it. But let me get you the dollar amount. We also get, I think they're monthly reports that actually shows production increase in terms of packaging the awards for students. So I know our folks are getting them packaged. Whether we receive as many as we have in prior years, that's another matter. And if students are not having access to them timely, could be a problem.
Thank you.
We've also kind of developed, I think, 4 or 5 different financial aid flyers to make sure that everyone's informed at every level. Advisors, faculty, student groups, because we think that getting the information out to them will make them aware of the various sources for scholarships and support that they have. They may not know it. So I hope you've seen those. If not, we can get them to you.
Well, I know that me personally, I've always wanted to make sure that we don't direct them to getting help, a student loan, because students do not know enough about what that student loan is about and what it encounters, and that they have to pay it back, So I know that we're restricted from federal, how much information we can give the students on how to access those loans. So, it's just something that's ongoing, that we want to make sure that the students are advised correctly and not just pushed to get the student loan.
We actually had completed in, I want to say, February, February, early March, a student financial aid and bursar services satisfaction survey. And from what they reported, very few of them are interested in private loans. I think it's kind of known that that's not the advisable way to go. So I was kind of pleased to see that result. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure.
Trustee Debbie.
I guess I'll start with FAFSA. One of the interesting factoids from one of the conferences I recently attended was the concerns around the evisceration of the Department of Education. Last year, we had just within the DOE, the conversion into the new system that caused a major disruption for FAFSA. So the concern being the fact that they're merging agencies to have, no one knows exactly how that's going to work, but if they have to do that, if they could not internally transfer seamlessly from one system to another, we have to anticipate the disruption that merging of two different agencies can cause. And so what might have been a 90-day delay last year, which really affected students greatly, could be a real catastrophe. So I think it's one of those things that we definitely, Chancellor, should be keeping in mind about what the profound implications can be. I want to go back to slide 5 or page 5 on your slides. About the tuition and fee summary, the presentation.
Sure. Yes, sir.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm tracking the math. You have in-district tuition growing about 3%, out of district about 3%, out of state 1%. Then when you get to the line for international students, it says 0%.
Well, because it didn't register in the single digit, it would have been multiple decimal points out. So we were
Okay.
trying to be consistent in the display. But when you look at 90 to 88, it's roughly a 2% decrease. I think that's where that number came from.
You're talking about the negative 2%?
Correct.
Right. I'm trying to do the math. If I were just doing simple math, when you looked at the percentage changes, they were all increases for in-district, out-of-district, out-of-state. International students shows 0%. I'm assuming that should be a negative number?
Mm-hmm. I'm explaining it may be because there's just a single decimal point here, and it may have been smaller than the 1%, so it wouldn't have registered. So it
Smaller
shows.
than, all due respect, smaller than 1% is not a negative number. Smaller than 0% is a negative number. I'm just trying to understand if I'm just looking at it as a cursory observer, I don't know if is it negative or is it smaller than 1%? Because how does the math now tally to the negative 2%, which shows the $2 million reduction in the expectations from tuition?
We'll take another look at that slide.
Okay, if you could please, because we have nothing for FY 24-25 for international students. Then the column for FY 26, you have the negative 5. So I'm assuming that should be in the negative, which will help the math be more cogent. The same thing happens when you look at the fees. It's the same exact scenario. It's all positive, and then you end up with the negative 3%. And just from trying to understand, on total fees, you have it going from 65 to 64, and if that's negative 3%, that math does not compute for me. Negative 3% from 65 would have been closer to 62 and a half or something.
We'll take another look at this slide and make corrections.
Okay. But are you following? If you look at it says 65 for FY 25, and for FY 26 it says 64. That's, maybe 2%.
Right.
Not 3%. So I think it's important that we understand thoroughly whatever you intend to convey is what we need to see, because when you go through these presentations, it's confusing, and without any deeper set of data to consult, you're kind of left dumbfounded in trying to understand that. On slide number 7, as far as the state appropriations, I know we discussed this in EC. We've received for the first two tranches of the funds from October and February. As far as the one for June 15th, are there any concerns about that the full board should be aware of as to what that amount might be relative to what the budget expectation is?
I don't think so. I think we would expect the full amount. I think the remainder that we're looking for in June is $9 million, and then it would be trued up subsequently.
Okay. So we don't see any issues, Chancellor, with the recalculations or the reconsiderations about, how the credentials of value seem to have exceeded what the state anticipated they would have to spend on?
Well, I must tell you that the report that we've gotten is that the amount of funding for the credentials of value for all 50 community colleges in the state that has exceeded the expectations. And so initially, the expectation was it would be about $49 million, and now we're looking at pretty close to $90 million. And so the state is wondering how they can sustain that, and that is one of the reasons why they're looking at certain high-demand fields that we can now proceed with as we offer. And then that is why, obviously, as was indicated in the report earlier, we may not be able to offer some of the programs that we offered previously as credentials of value. And so the model has changed, obviously, from enrollment to COV. So those high demand fields are critically important. So yes, we've all grown in the state, and the amount has increased, as I mentioned.
But we don't anticipate any reduction in our allocation for the third tranche.
We do not. No, we do not.
Okay. The next slide on page 8, I think here we're estimating what we think we're going to get from state appropriations for the different categories. Mm-hmm. So I know to the point Trustee Cheevan made earlier, we seem to be making advances, as far as, enrollment and the like. I see that we anticipate an increase for dual credit. Mm-hmm. However, there's a considerable decline for associate's degrees and associate's degrees high demand fields, about a 20% decline. Is there a reason we anticipate that?
I think that's based on the change in the credentials of value programs that we're seeing now. So those may impact us in FY26 because they may not be eligible for reimbursement as they are currently constituted.
I'm asking about the associate degrees. Am I conflating something there? Because I'm specifically not credentials of value, but the actual associate's degrees programs.
But
is there an effect between COVs and associate's degrees?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's one of the discussions that is under review now with respect to all of the associate's degrees that have been offered previously that do not result in the opportunity cost for students to be able to earn a living wage. And so the coordinating board as well as TAC are reviewing those degrees that are associate's degrees to make a final decision about which ones should receive the credentials of value funding and others that we will need to perhaps consider how we then offer those, perhaps for teaching out some of those, but we have been advised that there is no discussion or final decisions to be determined as of yet to get ahead of the legislature. And so before May, when there is sine die, we will get more details about what will be fundable, and then we'll bring that back to you. However, one of the things that we have done is to provide the board members with all of the information that we have gotten from the coordinating board and TAC pertaining to some of those changes that are going to be made. So in the last WAB, there was a packet that we shared with you. There will be another one that will be shared this coming Friday that will give you an update on all of what we just recently received on yesterday regarding those discussions that are underway about those programs that may not be fundable as a COV in this upcoming fiscal year.
Noted. Thank you. All right. Thanks for laying out the 3 different tax scenarios. I'll echo what Trustee Cheevan referenced earlier, I think we're on a positive trend, and I understand the inclination to want to be conservative instead of how we forecast what we think the likely scenarios are going to be. We can look at that two ways. One, glass half full, which says, hey, things should go well. And if we think it goes well, let's be prepared to make sure we capitalize on all those things going well. If we think it might not go as well, one of the things we really need to focus on is what we establish the tax rate at, because that's sort of our safety net. That's the one thing that we have relative control over in terms of local control.
Silence your phones, please. Thanks.
It happens.
I thought it was a remix for.
It happened. It's happened to me so many times, so no one feel bad.
So I think because of that, we should be talking about this in the context of a target tax rate. Because if we have a target tax rate, then I think all of us have sort of a focal point or North Star that we're thinking about. What do we think the target tax rate ought to be? And so that if we have all these unknowns that we practically have no way of controlling. Like, I mean, Chancellor, sine die everyone is excited about, but it depends on what goes on this session. Sine die might be October. And so there are a lot of unknowns, and so we're going to have to get a budget passed. So I don't want us to be so reliant on this, magical sine die date is when things come to a halt. The dance can continue after that.
Well, one of the things that we have been doing and we're continuing to do is to be proactive. And we have been doing that for well over a year now. And given the change in the funding to COVs that will be honored by the legislature, we just last week got an update, and we had a series of meetings where we were focusing on what that schedule should look like for fall of 2025, for spring of 26, and for the summer. And then looking at those three tranches of funds that we would get and how we then schedule in order not to have a flat budget, but to have a positive outcome. That's one of the reasons why, as Dr. Hahn mentioned, we will be looking at the high demand fields and would come to the board with a request to provide funding, one-time funding, from the fund balance potentially, that could help us to reach out to the community, to those students who are interested in those fields in order to enroll, and we could get the revenue from that, but in addition to that, serve the students in the community as well. Given these unknowns that were mentioned, such as the slow pace of perhaps being awarded their financial aid, and many other disruptions, such as with the international students not being enrolled, etc. So that is a part of the plan that we want to bring to you with more specifics, because that financial modeling is going to indicate to us exactly what will be uploaded in the schedule. It will give us the information that we need to know about how much revenue we will generate potentially each semester or each quarter, so that we can make sure that we're getting those dollars to continue our operations.
To your point, sir, we did a little research based on a previous comment you made about tax rate, where we looked at the closest competition and where we could approximate that, and we didn't include it because it would have been a dramatic increase in the overall tax rate. So we were concerned about your constituents and how they would feel about you going to them with an overall tax rate increase.
Yeah, well, and I would say this, for this trustee's perspective, I think when we're doing when we're considering options, it's always important to understand what are the comparables, right? We can't just look at our tax rate in a vacuum. There are considerations about providing tuition assistance. There are thoughts now about how do we support our students due to disruptions. So if we're solely looking at our tax rate in a vacuum, we're comparing ourselves to us. that's a different dynamic if we're comparing, even in the discussion with constituents. Hey, we're comparing ourselves to our peer institutions within the immediate area of the greater Houston MSA and in the state across the board. It's a different conversation that can then be had to say, hey, if we're really thinking about it, how is the institution meeting your needs? How is it meeting the expectations of the communities that we aim to serve? What are our priorities? And people can, vocalize what they think their priorities are, and we can try to adapt our tax rate based on what we believe the priorities of the constituents we serve are. So I just respectfully would say I think it's important that we have that to, as a reference point. Just put in a little corner box or something, doesn't need to be in the main thing.
We can provide the information, and we've done the research.
Okay, that'd be great. The next one is on slide 13, is about the cost of living adjustment. I see the 2% proposal, which is, understandable. I think what's going to be important is we want to get a clearer picture. I don't want to look at what's being proposed for this year in isolation. I think we should look at the cumulative impact. Last year, we made some significant increases in different categories. So if we're going to look at it, we should look at it in entirety. For example, with adjunct faculty last year, we were establishing a benchmark that made sure that we were at the top of the scale, if you will, for the region in terms of what we're paying our adjunct faculty. And if I'm mistaken there, it's because I've slept since then, but if I recall correctly, we were hitting the target rate. So if we're proposing an increase, one, we should look at how that increase, where were we prior to FY25? What would that increase look like going into FY26? And how do we compare to our peers in the area, relatively speaking? So I think a refresher on that, in the case of adjunct faculty pay, for example, is important. But on a whole, I think we just need to understand what the cumulative impact of any increase from FY25 coupled with any proposed increase of FY26 would be. Does that?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Just
Yeah.
want to make sure. I said a lot, but I want to make sure it was all captured.
Got it.
And indulge me, colleagues. I'm almost
Okay.
halfway done. On the so we talked a bit about deferred maintenance, IT. First of all, where are we with the adoption of the ERP system? Where are we in that process? I know it's not a budget question, but I kind of need finance advisors there.
I'll ask Mr. Jackson to come up. He's our interim CIO.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chancellor and Trustees. So the plan is to do an analysis next year, and then in FY27, we will actually implement the ERP system, and that is whether we stay with the same product, whether PeopleSoft, or whether we go someplace else, whether we replace our supercluster hardware that runs it today, or whether we move to the cloud. So the analysis as to what we'll do will occur in fiscal year 26, and then the action plan to implement will occur in fiscal year 27. And that's all part of the 5-year strategic plan.
Okay, so just a question regarding that. If you're doing the analysis in 26 and you want to implement in 27, when do you procure?
We would procure in 27. And it will all be dependent upon whether it is the cloud solution or whether it is continuing to run it on site here.
Okay, how long does a typical procurement process for that take?
Now, the process has been going about 3 months.
Okay, so if we did this in 3 months, I think it would take longer for this kind of system. How long would the implementation take? If we
Implementation will take probably a year, maybe a little bit more.
Okay, so I just think for the board, we need to see that. We've been talking about this, and it keeps being this moving target. This is the furthest out I've heard about it now, because prior to it was like, oh, something was imminent. We're supposed to see some options. Now we've pushed that out 2 years, is at least a year. Let me not say 2 years, at least a year, because
correct.
I think the reasonable expectation was we were already kind of doing the analysis now, but apparently that's not happened yet, and we're talking about that for FY26. And the reason I raised that question is in the context of what we're thinking about IT spend going into next year. You're saying, you've referenced the 5-year plan. I don't think that the board has a clear enough understanding of what our technology master plan is. I think if Trustee Vanderbilt Stalwart was here, she'd, get back on the horse of, yes, we need to understand what our the totality of our assets are in terms of IT is concerned. So when we're looking at, the $3.5 million that's proposed for the IT network, we're looking at that in a vacuum. It's not being looked at in the context of what's the big picture. The number might be big. We're not afraid of big numbers, but we have to understand what that big number is to understand why this $3.5 million makes sense, why all the other funds that we've allocated, at least for FY25, where all that fits within that. And I'm also curious how much of what was allocated for FY25 has been expended to date.
There was just a PO that went out, I believe, yesterday for $5 million for the IT network switches. And so on the network switch replacement, we are coming to the end of that project. So we had to replace all the switches across the district. They were purchased as far back as 2007. And that equipment was still viable and still running. It is still supported by the vendor until October 30th of this year. But we had to put a plan in place to replace that equipment. So this year we bought the equipment to replace all of the campuses. The only thing that remains for next year is this building. And so all that's built into the strategic plan that we'll be presenting to you shortly.
Okay. How shortly?
It's scheduled for a CEC presentation in the Executive Council, I believe, on April
24th.
That's fine.
Both master plans are facilities and IT. I'm sure will be scheduled.
That's a special budget meeting that we're having on the 24th.
Okay. All right. Good to know, because the facilities plan was the next one on my list. But since that will be presented, that's good. I can shorten my list of questions. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you.
So talk about facilities, Dr. Hahn, of the 80-something million we allocated for deferred maintenance this year, how much of that has been expended to date?
I'm going to ask Mr. McCracken to come up. I don't know that it was an $80 million figure. Let's see what we can say about that.
And I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I suggested that last year's budget, including us drawing down from fund balance, allocated approximately 80-something million dollars towards deferred maintenance. Am I missing that number?
No, we didn't get 80-something million. That number got reduced.
Okay. Does anyone have what our number was? And out of that number, strike the 80-something million.
Okay.
How much?
So we have about $4 million
maintenance
left in deferred maintenance out of the current year budget. And just in terms of kind of history, if we think in 2019, we had a facility condition index of about 5%, which anything under 10 is considered good. What the recommendation from the Jacobs study is that if we spent, $96 million immediately and then $33 million a year every year for the next 10 years, we would end up with a facility condition index that was a little bit better than 5%. Based on the spend that we have done so far, we are currently sitting at around a 10%, which means we are right at the borderline between good and average. If we spend $15 million a year for the next 4 years through kind of the end of the decade, we're going to be at about a 17.5 to an 18% facility condition index, which means that we are going to be at 20%, you are considered poor. So we will be kind of moving through the average range and getting close to poor. So what we've done is we've done a reanalysis of all of the items, kind of reassess them, which ones can be kind of pushed out another year, 2 years, 3 years, reprioritize them, which is where we came up with the $44 million kind of current need and the roughly $40 million it takes to support every year to support $1.6 billion in physical plant. The reality, I think, for us is that if we can make it work, right? Whatever we get, we're going to do our best to manage that. At a certain point, it really starts to show. And then we're going to have some serious discussions about how do we manage that. One way you manage it is you get rid of some buildings that perhaps are being underutilized. The other way you manage it is that you try to consolidate where you can.
I guess the question just comes down to, of the amount we allocated last year, what percentage of the deferred maintenance have we expended?
Have we tackled out of, like, I think I'm following your question. I'll get you exact numbers, but it's a relatively small portion of the overall need.
I understand that.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to track is, I know the number is not 15 million that we allocated towards deferred maintenance for last year. I know it shows that amount from fund balance usage.
It was 28. My memory came back. So it was,
I was juxtaposing numbers. 28 read 82 for me.
It was 15 in this year's budget, and we did a budget reallocation out of prior year budget before the budget year ended. So
Correct.
Together it was 28.
Yeah. So I stand corrected. That was the number.
Yeah.
Of the 28, how much have we expended to date?
So we have encumbered all but 4 million of that.
Okay.
Not all of it is being expended because many of these projects are
understand
kind of
that.
long-term.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I was really confused on the 80-something million. It threw
Yeah,
me
80,
for a minute. I'm sorry.
28 turned to 82 in my mind, and it just sounded good, so I went with
Sounds
it.
much better.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
Mr. Walker, 182. And then, so I think the rest of my questions really have to do with IT, and I'll just wait, Madam Chair, till April 24th when we get that update.
What we were attempting to do was to bring in a budget that could be reviewed, that would not create difficulty for the community, given the fact that there have been reports also about the tax rate and the migration of residents in the community to other areas because of certain circumstances, and then the loss of jobs of some of the residents as well in various fields. And what we wanted to do was to bring in the flat budget with the option as well. However, if the desire is to bring in a wish list budget to be considered with all of the items that were mentioned, we certainly can do that also. And if that is the pleasure and the request of the board, we will bring that. And then you can let us know what we should eliminate from that plan.
Madam Chair, if you will, I think it's essential. We want to have a full picture so that rather than having a prescriptive budget, so to speak, we have a greater understanding of what are the needs. And that's what helps inform the board's priorities. Because if we want to get so much of the picture, then we're just reacting to how much is shared. So I think getting a more comprehensive view into what we think the needs are is essential to us being able to set budget priorities.
If I can just comment on that, we did a very thorough, and I credit the previous folks on the budget team and the current folks on the budget team, did a very detailed analysis with every department, and we have a prioritized wish list, and it amounted to $66 million of additional desire. And we knew we could not find a way to pay for that. So we have each of those items prioritized in groups because we had the end users determine what was most important next and so forth. So we have that data that we can provide to you.
And because without the board seeing the 66 million in the wish list, then the board practically gets no opportunity to prioritize what the administration should focus on. So
We can provide that information.
Thank you. And that was what helped us come up with the conclusion of adding the faculty raises, the faculty and college raises, because we saw there was a need and a wish. So last year was the first time that, thanks to our board members, that we increased it by that amount. We had never done that before. So if we know what the wishes are, then maybe we'll be able to make those happen.
Okay.
So,
Thank
right?
you. Thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
First, I'd like to ask Trustee Davies about cumulative impact. I guess I didn't understand what you were asking with that. Since we are now, in my mind, on a new charted territory with the Department of Education, school vouchers, et cetera, we really don't have a history to look at a cumulative and to budget. You know, a lot of these changes aren't going to, so before I make my comments, could you explain what?
The cumulative that I was asking about was on the pay increases. That's the cumulative that I was referencing. I'm not sure which cumulative.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it was on pay increases.
Okay.
And COLA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the budget is priority one for this board in my mind. And there's a lot of moving parts in this organization. And it's complicated and it's intertwined with grants in the state and with tax rates, et cetera, et cetera. I have my little budget with my little company I run is one thing, but it doesn't compare to what the size of this is, and trying to grasp it all is overwhelming for me, quite frankly. And I guess some of the general concerns I have is the fact that out in the marketplace with the increased competition that Houston Community College is going to be seeing, and with the University of Texas getting into dual credit, and several schools are now having free tuition, and having to compete with that in the marketplace is going to be quite a challenge for us, I think. And the landscape is changing, and that being said, I'm pretty cautious about how we spend money, and I'm looking for a budget that's pretty conservative because we're in uncharted territory. And, I'm not even talking about state vouchers, how they're going to affect us. And that new funding model, I'm not sure how all that's going to happen. The Department of Education is being dissolved, and the immigration policies, I don't want to get into anybody's position on that, but you have to accept the fact that the immigration policies are changing, and how's that going to affect our international enrollment? I don't think it's going to increase it. But one of the things that I'm pretty adamant about on whatever kind of budget you have, your household budget or your business budget, is when you use long-term assets to pay for current liabilities, you're in trouble. And I don't want this school to ever get in that position when we're stealing money from the fund balance in order to pay our light bill every day, because that's a that's the first sign in my mind of somebody who's about to go bankrupt. And we don't want to get in that position, and we need to live within our means, whatever we can. And since a lot of this, we're not certain on what the state is going to pay, and it's a moving target. And so, I would recommend a flat and a very conservative budget. So, but to me, we need to tighten up our expense in. And, just one question. Have all the employees come back to work? Are there any still working from home?
But we're doing the assessment of that. We cannot, and one of the things that we're doing now is that we are making sure that we have, number one, the directories for the employees who are at this campus as well as all of the other locations throughout the district. That is needed for a variety of reasons, but that's number one. And that way, given the fact that we have faculty members who are mobile, staff members who are mobile, and they're going from one campus to the next for trainings, for teaching their classes, et cetera, it's been hard to identify who's where at which particular times in some instances. And that is why the directory is so critically important with the times that the staff members are there, so that we will be able to track that. So we are getting ready to bring on board, and I wanted to share this with the board, an individual who will help us with the operational efficiencies, looking at the staffing at the various locations, and this will be an interim position that will help us to identify. It is very clear that we have sent memos out to all of the members of the team on a number of occasions indicating that there is no remote work, that everyone is to be on site at their work locations. And to defy that is really insubordination. But we have to have all of the information in place in order to be able to determine who is working remotely, who is working on site. And we anticipate that we will have all of the systems in place very soon in order to be determined who is not coming to the job site. Because the board members were told in August of 2023 that all of the employees at HCC would be back at the work sites, not working remotely. So that's what we are leaning on.
You know, and I hate to be here, it is 2025.
I understand.
And I'm having to ask that question.
Correct.
You know, that's how we can tighten up around here. That's waste that could be used in a lot better ways in my mind, and that's one big concern. The other thing that I just want to touch on is deferred maintenance. That is, that's a tough one, and that's all I can say about it. I don't have an answer for that, but deferred maintenance is a tough one to put in the budget and how it gets allocated. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Thank you so much.
I do want to express a different opinion. On the work from home deal, this trustee wasn't here in August of 2023. I do run a business. I have employees. And I just think to paint a broad stroke for all employees and say everyone needs to be on site misses the realities of today's workforce, and more importantly, might not be considering what our future workforce is bound to look like. Employees in certain specialized services, when you think about IT, financial services, I don't know the in and outs of how things work at HCC. I don't know how to install a light bulb. I think that person needs to be here. But when someone is helping put this PowerPoint together that you're going to present, is there real value in them being present at 3100 Main to do that? Or is there someone who might have a specialized function that could work hybrid or work some, what they call it, 98 or 890, whatever, 9 days on, you get every other Friday off. So I don't know that a blanket statement that everyone should be back on site best serves the purposes of the institution in the long run in terms of talent retention, talent attraction. I think we need to really be more precise in how we're defining who needs to be on site. Sure.
I would just like to say that we do not have a work from home or other location or remote work policy. And so what we stand in jeopardy of is having litigation from employees who are coming to work and those who are not. So if it is the desire of the board for HCC to have a remote work policy that would protect the institution, then we can do that. But what we have been acting on is what the board members were told in August 2023 and what the expectations are of staff, so that we do not incur those complaints from others who are coming to work. So that's where we are.
I have a question. Was there a policy that was passed at the onset of COVID that allowed work from home, or how did that take hold?
And Mr. Nathan?
Yes, trustee, there was a policy at that time that was put in place to manage what was going on.
So your knowledge
and
is
so
that...
there was a shift, because of COVID, and then there was a slow bringing back. But then as of September 2023, everyone was brought back.
Was that
full-time.
policy officially rescinded?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns from the board members? If not, our next budget meeting will be on the 24th. So trustees, if you have any questions before, please submit them to Sharon so that she can give them to the chancellor, so we can make sure that we cover all that information and have all the information before. Okay? So I want to thank you. I want to thank the Houston Community College family for all your commitments and dedications to all. Please continue to take care of your self needs. Continue to take care of your families.
Madam Chair.
Find something to celebrate. We've lost close people to us, to our community college families here and also in our communities. So we just need to open up, be ready to listen to people, and just be there for each other. And just, like I said again, take care of yourselves, take care of your needs, and find something happy to do. And cheer for the Cougars, the U of H Cougars.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Hahn, I just wanted to thank you. I just think we're really lucky to have you. Very smart lady.
Thank you so much.
And everything you send us is very informative. And although we have questions and there's, that's what it's about, right? The dialogue. But I just wanted to say thank you. I'm so proud that you're our Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thanks to everyone. Thank you for all your input, and thank you for what you do to uplift Houston Community College. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Can I adjourn?
Oh, I thought I adjourned. The meeting of the Committee of the Whole is adjourned at
5:17 p.m.
Good night. Good evening, everyone.